and it should all come together. I did not. Here we're going to fine tune this too. This is a little. Ooh, that horse got some hip. Anyway, let's clean up the hip. If you feel like some of your horse hips or some of your horse bodies off a little bit, just kind of trim it up. Trim it up. Erase all of that extra line, and you get to decide, what do you want for your mane. You could do braids, you could do long flowy hair like this horse. You can do curly hair if you want to, totally up to you. The reason why I didn't teach you how to do the hair is because I want you to stylize your horse the way you would like to see it. There's so many different types of horses. There's like Arabian horses, pintos. Some of them have really short does. Some of them have like really beautiful, ooh, look at me, I'm so pretty locks. Totally up to you. I want you to stylize it the way you want. Now, it's going to be hard for me to tell you, since you're doing your own horse and your own style, it's going to be hard for me to tell you what type of like layers you want to use for your horse's shading. Like if you want to do the brown horse here, depending on your background, if you were just to do the horse alone, I would say that your really dark spots, like your eyeballs, these legs here, the shadow underneath the stomach, would probably be 3 layers of ink. The brown here would probably be 2 layers, this lighter brown here. And the really light browns where the light hits the back would be 1 layer. Maybe 1.5 layers actually, because your tummy is probably going to be 1 layer. But I don't know. Do you want a black horse? Do you want a brown horse? It's going to change based on the coloring you use. So I would highly recommend pulling up maybe a Google image and kind of, figuring out like your 3-2-1 formula, which is the darker layers, the darker colors are going to get more layers of ink. Your really light colors are going to get maybe 1 or 2 layers, and then build from there. All right. So I'm going to do a side diagonal hatch. And I'm going to keep my hand loose on the back here, so I don't use too much pressure, because I will. Especially with this rollerball ink pen of mine, it just like oozes ink. It's really hard not to go too dark too quickly. So I'm just going to put in my 1 layer here. And I'm trying my darndest to make sure that there's some space between my lines to allow this first layer to be light, because I want to build, right? So we'll see how this goes here. When you guys get to the tail, I want to challenge you to kind of move your pen strokes in the direction of how hair moves, kind of like flowy, long, luxurious locks. I would also encourage you to kind of do this with your mane as well. If you want a curly tail, then use the curly line strokes, or like kind of like the twisty curly line strokes. If you want a straight tail, then use like the really limp straight downward strokes or what have you. The goal here is that we're kind of mimicking how the hair acts in real life to create a sense of realism to our horse's body. Going to avoid this spot. I'm gonna draw in my shadow shape here. I'm doing I'm mapping. I'm mapping out my shapes. Trying to figure out where I should go light, where I should go dark. Looks like the light source is hitting his back. You see it? So we're just gonna make these the lighter areas. I'm now going to go in the opposite direction. This is called a crosshatch. And I'm literally just flicking my wrist, or actually, I guess I'd be flicking my fingers. Yeah. I'm actually going to have to, for your longer strokes, you're going to have to flick from your wrist instead of your fingers. And then for your smaller strokes, you just flick from your fingers. That's how it goes. Because you don't need as big of a flick, I guess. That makes sense. For the hair, I am not going to do a cross hatch. I'm going for the free flowing look here, friend. I got wind in my hair. I'm so pretty. So for my second layer, I am going to go in the opposite direction using a side diagonal hatch to kind of try to help close up those spaces of white in between my lines. But I'm going to make sure that my pressure is still super light. I have a roller ball pen, so the ink comes out quite easily at just the slightest adjustment of pressure. If you have a pen like mine, you might want to hold your pen back a bit near the end to force your hand to go light. As you're doing this, you just want to apply the second layer to any area that might be darker than your first layer. That includes like a darker brown or a pitch black. Right now we're layering, or we're building our layers of shadow to create a sense of depth. So we're moving from one layer to two layer to three layer. Your third layer is going to be even darker, but it's only going to be reserved for the spots that are your darkest brown, so to speak. As you can see here, I'm adding an additional layer of shadow. I'm going in the opposite direction to help eliminate some of that white. My hand is also has changed positions where it's further down on the pen, more towards a regular writing position. This is going to ensure that I am allowed to add a little more pressure with more control, and it's also going to help me get into the tight, tiny spaces that need the shadowy attention or the extra detail that I am working on. Additionally, you can also see near the shoulder, the top of the shoulder, just underneath the chin, the light source is hitting the back of the horse, going in at a diagonal from the top right hand corner of the paper. So the body of the horse is going to be blocking some of that light. So this back leg here is going to have more shadow in it. It's going to appear a little bit more darker. That is why I'm adding an additional layer. Now near the armpit, you can tell on the left hand side of your paper, near the armpit that connects to the chest, on your leg that's furthest out, the chest is casting some shadow upon that as well. So you're going to add an additional layer to that area as well. Anywhere where two muscle groups come together to create an extra shadow, you just want to be mindful of how the body and the skeletal structure of your horse is working, because as the muscles come together, sometimes there's a little bit of shadow caused by the overlapping of muscle coming into one piece as it wraps around the body of the horse itself. So these are all things that you want to keep in mind as you're adding your additional shadow. I believe that this would be layer number 2 or 3 at this point. Now at this point, it's all about considering where you need to darken your darks, crispen up your line, add your details. Now, if you wanted to do a background, you can. Just remember, you might have to adjust or add a few extra layers to your horse to make your horse pop out. So keep that in mind when you are doing your background. And that, my friend, is how to draw a horse using proper proportions and measurements and an ink pen.